Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here. I'm very excited to be here and share with you some of the information that we have. That was kind of a difficult presentation to follow, though, I have to say. That was very, very fascinating. But sure is motivating to think about how we're going to prepare students for these types of careers. I've got two little ones at home, and I can't even imagine the kinds of career opportunities that will be there for them, particularly in the areas of the STEM disciplines. So that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today. We've got some motivation. Now let's look at some data. I provided this presentation just a couple weeks ago to the curriculum alignment group and also followed Mike's presentation about the same 3D manufacturing and really had a lot of interest in the room. So I'll share with you a little bit about not only the information that we are starting to gather and look at, but also how it's going to be used and how it will help inform the curriculum alignment initiative. So that's what we've called our presentation today, using data to inform that curriculum alignment initiative. I do want to start out with giving you a little bit of background about how we got to where we are with the data sharing among the partnering institutions. Several years ago, the College Access Summit spurned a couple of the work groups. So we've got the resource sharing work group, we've got the curriculum alignment group, and another one is the data sharing work group. Now the data working group, I'm co-chairing with Joyce Romano from Valencia College, and also at the time when it began, another colleague, Mark Poisel from UCF. We started this group and got together some of the IR type folks, the institutional research type folks from Valencia, all the other partnering state colleges, UCF, and also the K-12 sector. And we all got together and had several meetings over the course of a year to talk about the kinds of data that would be useful for us, because one of the founding concepts of the Higher Education Consortium in Central Florida was to share information and data to streamline the articulation of students and also understand their success. So we started out and we developed some types of data feedback templates and reports that we wanted to develop. We also engaged people from the state at the Florida Department of Education to talk about the K-12 data, the state college system. And that's something that we still are working toward, and that's something, there's been some turnover at the state level, so we've got new folks up there that we're working with now. So that's something we are working towards. But one thing that we were able to kind of put under this umbrella of data sharing is some of the feedback reports that UCF started to provide to our state college partners. And so each of our state college partners for the past 4 or 5 years has received a customized feedback report that was developed in our unit, Analysis and Planning at UCF. And it provides information kind of from there's 4 major sections of the report. So the first section of the report for each of the partners, so again, Valencia, Brevard, Lake Sumter, all of our partners have received this, gives a snapshot of the Direct Connect program. And everyone's report looks the same, or that page of the report looks the same. Gives a snapshot of the numbers of what the students look like coming in through the Direct Connect program. Then the next 3 sections of the report are customized to each of the colleges, and it tells them about their students who have come to UCF. So we've got data of students coming through the door, what they look like coming through the door at the admissions standpoint, numbers of students that are articulating over to the university. We've got another section looking at student progression and retention rates and graduation rates as they're moving through the system at UCF, how many times they're changing their major, what kinds of course loads they're taking. And then the last section of the report is graduation. We then turn the cohorts around and look at the students from when they're walking across that stage, receiving their diploma from UCF, how many students then came from each of our partnering institutions, and what do those students' majors look like, and how long did it take to get there, how many students have excess degrees. And so it's looking at the students from the other end of the cohort, or different type of cohort. So again, just a little bit of background, because I did see some hands in the beginning to see that there's some folks here who this is the first time at a College Access Summit. So there's already quite a bit of work that's going on with data sharing. So the information that I'm sharing with you now today is kind of the next steps, the next generation of data sharing that we're getting into. That was kind of developing a template report. It was all very high level. In fact, we developed the report. We tried to make the lookout and feel of the report look similar to the iPEDS feedback report, kind of executive level bar charts, not real data. But now we're getting into more detailed data and looking at individual student pathways through UCF, particularly those from our partnering schools. There's been a recent, shall we say, revitalization of some initiatives at UCF looking at student success. In particular, we have a strong interest in the numbers of transfer students that we have, so this is a particular data point that we need to focus on, and also in the STEM disciplines. Again, we've got the motivation for looking at and understanding STEM discipline students. So with that, we started some internal studies. We have so many students that we thought a good way to approach this problem would be some data mining techniques to look at the data. We can't look at individual students, we have so many of them. And so using some data mining techniques to start drilling into the data to start identifying large areas or large pockets of students that could use an intervention or need some kind of support or some kind of assistance where we could pinpoint those areas with resources. And so we're looking at some different data mining techniques to try to identify these areas. Again, specific to, or one of the large questions is STEM disciplines and then also transfer students. So that's kind of the background for where we are today. We started out with this initial study. We shared it with the curriculum alignment group, and wow, there was a lot of interest. And so now we're talking about what are we doing next and what are the next steps, what will we be taking. So I'm going to share with you kind of those three perspectives that I talked to you about on the feedback report, but this is specific to this study that we're now engaging in, which is looking at student success, particularly in the STEM disciplines. Let's look at it from the admission standpoint. So what do students look like when they're coming in the door at UCF and they're hopeful and they're at orientation and they're getting ready to enroll? What do they look like? What can we learn about those students? Let's then look at the students from the perspective of as they're moving through the pipeline, what ones are falling off and what can we do to help them? And then I like to turn the cohorts around and look at students at the graduation standpoint. I love looking at students after they've graduated. I love that from a data perspective because then you know the data is static, that students graduated and the data doesn't change. And we can learn a lot about a student who has graduated. What does a student profile look like of a successful student versus the profile of an unsuccessful student? So let's start with admissions. This is just a simple bar chart to give you, or line chart to give you an overview of what our baccalaureate graduates look like. There's a lot of them. In fact, if you can see the y-axis here, we're approaching 18,000 degrees, baccalaureate degrees awarded every year. That's quite a bit. That's quite a number. That's graduates. Those are diplomas awarded. And about 40. Oh, excuse me. I'm mistaken. I'm saying this wrong. I'm getting so excited about the graduates. Getting ahead of myself. This is new enrollees. So excuse me. This is new enrollees. So these are students coming in the door. So every year we've got about 18,000 students walking in the door. These hopefuls coming in, and about 40% of those students who are coming in the door are coming in with a STEM major. Most of them do have a major declared, and 40% of them are STEM majors. So that's this little group down here. So this is both transfer students as well as FTIC students. So let's drill down into those. I'm going to drill down into, here's our mountain here of STEM versus non-STEM. We're going to drill down into the STEM group. And how many do we have? It's almost about a little over 5,000 students coming in as a STEM major. So kind of mental note, that's 5,000 students coming in every year as a STEM major. This is the breakdown of those 5,000, let's see, about 6,000 students that are STEM majors, and how many are transfer students. And we're going to see about a little less than half of them are in fact transfer students. A little more are FTICs, and we have some other transfers. A lot of other transfers are mostly other SUS institutions. But the growth has been quite a bit, and you'll notice that FTIC here, in fact, has declined quite a little bit. And that's because, well, there's less FTICs coming through the door and more transfers. This is proportional to the numbers of students that are coming in through the door. So certainly a lot of interest in STEM disciplines from our transfer students. So now we're going to drill in one more step. So we drilled into STEM. Now let's drill into these guys, the transfer students, STEM transfer students. And where are they coming from? Well, we've got 60% of them are coming from our partner schools. So most of them are coming in from our partner schools. We've included the other schools we mentioned this morning that have an interest in the consortium agreement or the direct connect agreement. And the growth, but this is the interesting part. Take a look at the growth over time of those partnering schools, particularly Valencia's growth. Their band here has expanded quite a bit. So this is showing us an interest of these students. These are students walking in the door with a declared STEM major. There's a tremendous growth in the interest in STEM disciplines from these schools. It's almost flat from the non-partnering institutions or non-AA transfers. So again, that's just some kind of high-level statistics. And as we're starting these data mining exercises, that's usually where we start. We usually start with high level, we look at the patterns, and then we drill down and keep going in to see what kind of other details we can uncover. Okay, so that's the snapshot of coming in the door. Now what about when the students get here? What can we do to try to understand the student success pathways when they come in the door? So here's a fun picture. So I really like this picture because it represents a lot about what we do. We take really complex data and we try to present it in a way that people can use it. Those previous charts that I showed you was very high level. What can you do with that data besides saying, oh, that's nice? We kind of get that. That was maybe supported by some anecdotal evidence. But this represents true grassroots type data that people can use as actionable information. What this chart represents is we're trying to get a handle on students' performance in specific courses. And so what we've done here is we've plotted each of these little dots or each of these bubbles represents a course. And it is the numbers of students who have taken that course over the past 5 years. So we took 5 years worth of course data. And thank goodness for the types of folks that I have in my area. Mr. Meghal Park is sitting here at this table, and he's the genius, the data genius behind all this. He's taken 5 years worth of course data at UCF and plotted it here, each one representing a course. The x-axis, the horizontal axis, is the numbers of students who were unsuccessful in that class, so a DFW. The y-axis, or the vertical axis, is the percentage of unsuccessful transfer students. So what that means is if you're a bubble that's out here, that means there's a large volume of students who are unsuccessful in that class. But if you're also up in here, it means a high percentage of unsuccessful students. We need to look at them both because there might be a high numbers of failures, but that's because it's a very popular class. Lots of students are taking them. So where can we start pinpointing? If we're looking for particular courses that we want to start pinpointing to address an issue, we're going to look up in this quadrant here. This upper right-hand quadrant is where we have high numbers of failures and a high proportion of failures. You'll notice these dots are different colors. Those are the course levels, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 level courses. One thing that I found interesting as a, shall I say, I'm a non-student person. I don't work with students. I work with data. I found it interesting of how many blue bubbles I saw up here. Those are 1,000 level courses that transfer students are failing. Large numbers of transfer students are failing. That's interesting. I didn't know that transfer students took 1,000 level courses, but in fact, clearly they do. And there's a couple of them that are being not successful. You'll notice also the bubbles are different sizes. We've got small ones and big ones. Well, the size of the bubble actually represents where there's a disparity between freshman performance in that class and transfer performance in that class, meaning native students, or we call them native students, ones who came to UCS as a freshman and are now juniors or whatnot, compared to a student who came to UCF as a transfer initially. So that's the size of the bubble. So this little bubble here means that it's a high failure class, a high proportion of students are failing, but you know what? FTICs and transfers are performing kind of similarly. It's a hard class. But these larger size bubbles means that the transfer students are performing worse than the FTIC students. So maybe we should look at those and try to figure out what's going on. Why are the transfer students performing so differently than FTICs? So again, I can click on any one of these bubbles and bring up that class and say, oh, here's a class, let's take a look. And let's provide this information to the department chairs. And my good friend Teresa Dorman, who's here, I want to pick on you, she's in the College of Sciences at UCF. And she was here at the curriculum alignment meeting and has started to take a look at this data and is helping me work with the UCF department chairs to provide this data to them and start asking the kinds of research questions using this data to drill down and get data out of here that the folks at UCF could start using. And then also start sharing it with some of our partnering institutions as well to start drilling down. So anyway, again, this kind of represents the actionable information that we can start drilling down into. So I'll give you just one example because I don't think our work here today is meant for us to start picking apart the classes. Although I'll tell you what, the curriculum alignment folks were ready to get to work. They were rolling up their sleeves when they saw this chart. They were ready to start, working on the specific courses. But that's not what we're going to do here today. We're just going to talk about the concept and share with you what we're doing. But I'll just give you one example. So that example is Calculus 2. I don't know about you, but I had to take Calculus 2. And that was a tough class back when I was back in the day. So a lot of students are still having trouble with that class. And we saw that was one of those classes that was ending up in the upper right-hand quadrant. It's lots of students are unsuccessful in that class, and a high proportion of students are unsuccessful in that class. So let's look at the difference between transfer students and freshman students and their success in that class. This is a chart that looks at how those students prepared for Calculus 2. Now this is, again, 5 years worth of data. So we've got down here, you can see in the total, over 5,000 students have taken this class since 2007. That's a lot of students. And because we have such a large N, we can really do some data mining. We've got, in this column, those students who passed Calculus 2, and we're calling pass ABC, we're calling a fail, just for the sake of the table, DFWs. We've got about a 62% pass rate. So about, I'll round it, 40% are not successful in that class. Now let's look backwards. This is the student's first attempt at Calculus 2, because I'll tell you one thing that kind of surprised me. Again, I don't work with students, so I'm learning as I see the data. I was surprised at how many students repeat Calc 2. I thought that was interesting. I didn't think there were so many repeaters. Well, good for them for keeping, trying, keep it going. But I found that interesting, and that's going to be, I think, another phase in our study, in our research. We haven't addressed that with the data yet, but I thought that was interesting. But let's look at their Calc 1 preparation. Where did you take Calc 1? And I love the calculus sequence because it's like 1, 2, 3. It's easy for me to figure out the sequence. Let's look at all the different ways students can earn Calc 1 credits. All kinds of different ways. You can take AP credit. You can transfer the credit. There's some students who take combinations of both. Some students take UCF credit only, so they've taken Calc 1 at UCF. I think it's funny, there's some students who have taken AP credit and then they also take it UCF, which is good. Maybe they really didn't feel prepared. But let's focus on just these two. These are students who are the pure students who only took a transfer credit or have a transfer credit for Calculus 1, and they had a passing rate of 42% in their first attempt of Calculus 2 at UCF. And those students who had taken Calculus 1 only at UCF, no AP credit, no transfer credit, their pass rate was 58.8%. There's a difference. Now, we haven't gotten into, is it statistically different? I'm sure it is. Or, reasons why it's different. I don't know why it's different, but it is clearly different. And it motivates us for understanding why and what we can do to help make these numbers, ideally, get this number up, right? I mean, you want both the numbers to match. You'd like the lower number to be a little bit higher. Again, we don't know why. It's easy to say, oh, it's clearly because the students are underprepared. But that's not, it's not as black as white as that. And I know that everybody here knows that too. These are two different types of students. What I don't know about these transfer students is their background. I don't know how their SAT scores or how their high school GPAs, for example, compare to this group here. And I can tell you that I know that it's going to be a different number. There's a different type of student that goes to a state college or a community college before they come to a university. So there are two different animals that we're looking at, if you will. So I guess my point is that we know that there's a difference. We don't know why there's exactly a difference, but I do know that it's not just one reason. It's a multi-factor problem. But the one thing that we can start to do is look at the student preparation, because that's certainly one thing that those students could certainly be benefited by. We drilled down a little bit further then. We said, okay, we know that there's a difference between those students who had a transfer credit versus those who had just a UCF credit in Calculus 1. Let's look at the grade distribution, because students will have different grades. So I thought this was interesting. This top table is those students who have that Calculus 1 credit only from UCF. And down here is those students who had the transferred Calculus 1 credit only from a transfer institution. And here's the grades in Calculus 1. And then again, here's the pass-fail distributions. And notice that those students who had a B in Calculus 1 at UCF passed at about 61%, which was very similar to the A's from the transfer institution. So again, is there something going on here with student preparation? It looks like it to me. But this is just how we're getting started. It doesn't answer all the questions. In fact, perhaps it's raising even more questions than giving answers. But it's giving us the ability to develop some good research questions, which again, it's going to get down to the folks, the chairs of the departments and the curriculum folks getting together and having these discussions. So that's we took a look at the snapshot of students coming in. Now we kind of giving you an idea of the next generation of looking at data and sharing data among the institutions and what we can do. Let's turn it around and look at it from the easy data standpoint. That's student degrees. How do students look like when they're walking out the door? Again, we looked at numbers of students coming in. Here's the different perspective. This is baccalaureate degrees each year from UCF. Of course, it's gone up and up and up. We've got, here's the 11,000 number I wanted to kind of brag about. 11,000 degrees being awarded, baccalaureate degrees being awarded every year from UCF, which is a tremendous number of diplomas being printed and hung on walls. And here's the STEM numbers are kind of split here, but you kind of have a visual. There's about 1,000 here, another 1,000 or so here. So about 2,000 or so of students with a STEM discipline degree. And here's those that are from the transfer population. So here's something interesting, and I think that this is something that UCF is very proud of, and I think that folks from the State College and our partnering institutions are very proud of, that half of the baccalaureate degrees awarded at UCF are from transfer students. So are they having trouble in calculus? Looks like it. But are they graduating, and is there a success story here? There certainly is. This is a tremendous success story that everyone here is very, very proud of. A lot of those degrees are being awarded, and a lot of these students are being provided with this access they wouldn't otherwise be awarded. So we're going to drill down again. Let's drill down into these transfer students. We see how many are STEM discipline. Let's drill down into transfers again and see where they're coming from. Again, we've got a tremendous growth in our partnering institutions. You can see down here. These are all of our partners. And of those, more than half of the baccalaureate degrees that are being awarded to transfer students, 66% are being awarded to our transfer, to our partnering institution. So a very large portion there. And check that out, a 40% growth over the past several years since 2005, just in the STEM disciplines. So it's a tremendous success story. Okay, so as I mentioned, I like looking at degrees data. I like looking at graduates because their data is static now. It doesn't change. Now I can study that student backwards, look at their course taking behavior. And we were wondering, what do we want to know about a graduate? We can look at a profile of a successful student, which is interesting. But also we can get a better sense for how efficient were they in achieving that degree. Because of course the state's very interested in that from a resource perspective. Well, of course we are too. So let's look at excess credits. In my naive days before I really got into this data, I thought that you came into UCF as a transfer student with 60 credits, you completed 60 more, you had 120, and you graduated. But apparently that's not really how it exactly happens all the time for everybody. But we know that if a student's coming in with a transfer degree with an AA, we know that if they're getting more than 60 credits or more than 90 credits, I think we all agree that's a lot of credits that the student's graduating with. It's probably in excess. So let's look at those from the partnering institutions and the non-partnering institutions. We split the two. And let's look at the STEM versus the non-STEM, those who had accumulated less than 60. So again, they've already had, this is 60 only at UCF. Let's look at the 61 to 90, which is getting high. The 91 or more is, I think, really high. STEM has more of the higher numbers of credits, not a surprise, right? When we look at STEM versus non-STEM, both groups, there's more in the STEM disciplines. That's not a surprise. We know that STEM disciplines typically require more credits. But let's look at these two numbers here. The STEM discipline partner institutions, 16.7% or about 17% in that excess credit group, if you will, versus 23% in the non-partner institutions. So don't ask me what this means, because I don't know what it means. But I can guess, and I can maybe point us in the direction of saying that there's something going on with the partnering institutions. Something's going on with those students. And something with bringing these students in from these institutions is making it so that they are not in this group of having so many excess credits. They're coming in, maybe they have a better idea of where they're headed, maybe they have a better idea of what classes they need, and maybe they're more focused on what major they're in. But they're certainly, I don't know, those are all speculations, but I certainly see that they're doing a good job or a better job than the non-partnering institutions. So something successful is going on there. Again, just another thing that we can look at to help inform the data. We didn't know this until we made this table and looked at it. And did this table give us any actionable items? I'm not sure, but we don't know until we create a table like this and we start drilling down into it if we will have actionable information or not. Well, that's the end of my presentation. Again, we've kind of looked at it from three perspectives: coming through the door, making their way through the pipeline, and then that backwards cohort, looking at it from the graduation standpoint when looking backwards. But again, I also hope that you would get out of this presentation an idea of the things that we can do as a community, and getting together and looking at students from this perspective, and also what the data sharing initiative can do for us. With that, I'll open it up for questions. The stunned silence. Yes, we can make those available to you. Absolutely. And I think that you'll be hearing more, particularly from our partnering schools. I think you'll be hearing more from not just me, but also from Teresa and from Angie about how we can use this data and get this data out into the curriculum alignment process and actually make it usable. Well, we certainly could. Right now, the data that we have developed is developed at the course level. Like we've drilled it, we've summarized it to a prefix number, but the underlying data behind it is all there. And so that's kind of the concept of our data mining techniques, is that we're going to drill down until we get to the detail that we need. So if it was information that was needed by anybody at UCF, we certainly could provide it. Anything else? Yes, we absolutely have. In fact, yeah, I don't have any of the data with me today, but that is something that we provided. So this PowerPoint was just a handful of slides, 5 or so slides, to kind of give you an overview. We provided a deck of information to our student. We have a student success steering committee at UCF who's drilling down into all of this data, and we're looking for those different pieces of items that are actionable. So I don't have any of that to share with you here today. And I really can't speak to it off the top of my head, but I will tell you that we're certainly looking at demographics as one of the issues. Any other items of interest? Okay, well, thank you so much for letting me come here and speak with you today.
Thanks, sweetie, again.